Yeah.
So I like having it record. All right. So we're back online in the second hour. Hey, I'm still me. Does anybody have any specific questions they want to bring up? Is there any APIs in particular you want to play with? Was there anything that sounded crazy?
There's probably some things that sound crazy, but still. I know that I think it was Captain Odin that at the very beginning almost, he asked if we were going to show, what would you call it, back engineering from the actual API calls to something that wasn't documented.
Oh, I glanced that. I didn't read it thoroughly. But let's see if I can wing something. Maybe not the whole thing, but at least I think I can give an example of how you'd see it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's stick with LinkedIn because like I said, I know I've done this. And now I'm going to hit my, is it Control F12 or just F12? It's F12.
F12.
Yeah. And what I do is I start looking at the network traffic, and let's say I wanted to go to, and now this is the other, which I had mentioned earlier I was going to do, but the major difference of like a web page versus an API call, right, is when you start typing, you see how much traffic happens, like, back and forth on one API call, or I'm sorry, one web page load. And all of these, like, let's say status 200, right? Those were all individual API calls pinging a server. The 200 means there's a good response. And that's what in the document, let's see, somewhere in here, I talk about the different responses you get back, and there's a lot of them. Oh, I didn't do? Let me also segue into that one as, I don't even have it. Let me launch my script writer. API syntax writer. Okay. And then, so for responses, here I have, like, these are hyperlinks I built into the tool that'll pull up like good references. And so these are some of the responses. So the 100 and 101, these are what things mean. So a 200 is a good, hey, things were okay, right? Which is more often than not, that's what you're looking for. But when you get like a 404 back, right, that means it's not found. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. But these are cheat sheet ways of like, hey, I get a code back under my status text as one of the response fields. And so let me also show that as a response. And here, I just have it here. This is the syntax for your API call. You can get all the headers, you can get just response text, you can get the body, you get the status text, and the status is the actual number, right, that we're discussing. The status text will be the, like, for this would in this case would say 200, and this would say okay, right, as the values.
If the text was actually there.
And that's why, I wish they would, the status text, why would be nice if it actually threw in more of a description, because there's a lot of information on some of these things of like what they often mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here also, I had initially these in my API calls, and I realized I'm just going to give links to stuff instead of having all the stuff in my syntax writer. But as a general rule of thumb, the 100s, the 200s, the 300s, the 400s, right? The 300 redirect, that also, if you see one, and you can prevent it from redirecting, which I mentioned earlier, it's one of the options. But let's go back into now. Let's go back and look at the different API calls that happened. So all of these 200 are theoretically things that you could mimic and fake. And here's the headers. So here you go, and let me see if I can make this a little bigger here. So see this request URL, right? That's showing you the endpoint. It was a GET request, right? The responded with 200. It tells you the remote address and policies. Here are the headers, though, that were these are the response headers, and then there's a difference between. Is it the sent headers, or in Fiddler it broke it down really well of your request headers and your returned headers. I forget what the actual names are.
response headers that it's saying it itself there. What did you have? I think you had the other ones further down.
Oh, the request headers. Thank you. All right. Yeah, you're right. So these are the ones that you would set in your API call. Like in this case, I can see it does compression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me rephrase that. My web browser used compression when it sent it to their LinkedIn API and said, hey, when you return back the data to me, give it to me compressed.
Yeah.
And also, hey, I'm actually doing it. I want an image, right? But by the way, these, like, you can put in commas. It gets a little complicated. Again, look at the HTTP protocol to help understand exactly what's going on in each of these things. Like in language here, these are different things that you can configure and set.
Yeah.
Here's the refer. So actually, this is one that where it wouldn't, the stuff I was doing, I couldn't. It wouldn't work unless I provided the referring URL. LinkedIn wouldn't allow it for the API call to work unless I set the referrer header to basically look like it was coming from LinkedIn.
Yeah, and here you get into the tokens that we talked about earlier, because
Yes.
these ID tokens and stuff that is in the referrer here, they will time out at some point. So you can't just copy this as plain text and then expect it to work tomorrow.
No.
No.
No, and that's what you would do is you'd say, oh, you know what? It had one here. Let me go back a phase, or two, and see if I can figure out what request was used to get that token, right? And then what you do is you build that in to replicate that process, so you get your new token, and then you use that next time, and you can keep going, right?
Yeah. Again, this is mostly if whatever they have isn't an actual API. It is backwards engineering their web service, because we are at the moment accessing whatever LinkedIn is showing us when we are logged in. Whereas if LinkedIn actually has an API that would deliver this information to you, that would most likely be well documented. Whereas this isn't documented. LinkedIn knows it. The web developer or the web whoever, admin or whatever they are used to actually make LinkedIn, they all know all of this. They have probably built it themselves or something like that. But for us to actually access it and only get the information that we wish to grab from a page here, we can still leverage whatever they did, because they have tried to structure it in a way so they can actually work with it themselves. And yeah, but it can be quite complicated to actually backwards engineer this.
Yeah, I was trying to show an example where I had noticed that they did that MX XML request, because I remember seeing that in here. I'm like, oh, inside their web page, they are using those that other type of an API call, not the WinHTTP call, right, but the other one to return data. And I'm like, oh, that's how we can use that one instead, right, and mimic that. But I don't use developer tools all that often. Let me see. Actually, I think I have Fiddler. Yeah. So let me start up Fiddler, and I think even if it doesn't work as well, the concepts are everything is the same as far as what happens. But for me, and understanding what's going on was like, wow, it's a lot easier to grasp. And so right now, it's actually looking at my web traffic, right? I can say, and let's stick back with here. I'm going to drag. Where did it go? Here we go. I'm going to isolate that. Come on, switch to it. All right, it's not going to do it. I only want it to track Chrome, so I can simplify that.
Yeah.
Right? So now it's just going to track my Chrome traffic. And actually, you know what? Just because I know, because I have some other tools that are running in the background through Chrome, and so it would track all that. Let's switch over to Firefox, and that way we don't see that other junk. And I think here I can remove all, right? And now we're going to go ahead and I'll go to my home page, and I'm going to click my LinkedIn button. This is the stuff I was saying as far as it doesn't work as well as like I wish it did.
Yeah, because of course the browser is actually detecting that there is now a proxy between it and the internet, and Fiddler isn't doing a great job at actually securing the traffic in the right manner. So,
but let's go ahead. And now I went to my site, right? And I'm looking. So see these, actually see the 443, right? That was the traffic where it started tunneling to it and then stopped. But on my site, now look at here. Here's the request headers, right? And I can see, guys, I'm trying to zoom in. Hopefully you guys, it's large enough. This is the headers. And so this is where I could borrow from this, or I could look at it. Was it the syntax view? No, why? Huh, I swear that used to have stuff in it. This, if I was hitting a page, actually, let me see if I go to my, I was trying to bring up a form where I could ask a question. You'd think I would, actually go to my own website and know where that was.
Yeah, but you've probably removed it.
Yeah, okay, anyway. But there's that, then here are the cookies, right? So this is where I can look at what my cookies are for that browser, right? And what's being, captured. I can look at the actual raw data that's going back and forth. I can see if there's JSON or XML getting returned, and that's where, oh, you know what? Let's borrow from here, and let me try this one more time here. Oh, I'll just open hyper. Oh, I guess that's not terrible as a shortcut. Let me go. I'm going to go over now into Firefox, and I'm going to ping that. And theoretically, I think if I now look at that traffic,
it is at the bottom. You need to click on that request in Fiddler to actually see it.
Where?
At the bottom there.
The bottom. I'm not seeing the bottom.
At the request in the left window of Fiddler, you need to click on the actual API Wonderground one.
I'm hearing a beep every time.
When you click it?
Yeah. There's some other window that is like open, and it's not letting me. Oh, there it is. There it is.
Okay. Something.
Yeah. So now. So here's the request. Now this is what I was hoping. I thought it would show me the data that was returned in XML format.
But that's not the return. That's the request that you have there. You need to. Isn't that? You're at the bottom there. You have the favor icon. Yeah, you should be able to see it in there. Yeah. Can you look at the headers and see what it's actually saying? So that's the request, and it's a get.
Oh, you know what? All right.
Yeah.
All right. It's ironic. I haven't used Fiddler in a long time, obviously, but it was one of the things I liked about Fiddler. This top part, this is all the stuff that is with my API call going out, right? The bottom part, which Jackie you would remembered, was that's talking about the stuff that comes back, right? So it was really easy for me to be like, oh, here's the stuff that I'm dealing with sending there, and I can actually also I can drag something. Is it the compose?
Yeah, the auto responder it's the composer.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. And this will lay out, and I can actually hit execute, and it will go repeat that API call, right? Yeah. So I can hit it, and it will simulate everything, and I can test within here, not even doing an AutoHotkey, right? But then I can go back and look at. Let's go back to the. How do I get back to that other view? Oh, here we go. And this is this is what is sent, and this is what is returned. And so I can look at it, and what I was trying to do was this form view. Where's the form view up here? Oh, and I would have thought that would have had it. But if you enter a form, you'll see the key value pairs showing up in here and how they're broken out, and it parses it for you. But here you're seeing how the data comes back to you. Oh, am I not on the right thing?
I would have thought that you were on the right thing.
See, I still would have thought that would have been visible there.
Yeah, I would have believed so too, but maybe...
Oh, that's a 304 though. Where's...
okay, so you have it there, the one below.
Right here?
Yeah, that should be the one.
There we go. There we go. And here's the structure, right?
Yeah.
So here's how it's basically, because browsers now have built-in stuff that help with this. But you can, it's another way that if you were using your browser, you could see the type of data that's coming back and decide what you want to do with it.
Yeah.
But this is, so Captain Odin, was that at least a start at explaining how you would back into it and figure out what was going on?
I'd say, of course, if I'm just saying, it sure is, but if we were to do this job, we might want to pick one that we actually knew to do, because this way it is what we actually do. Back and forth, slowly figuring out where the stuff is actually happening. And the one here where you're actually doing it for a true API call, that's a fine example, because we can easily see what's going on. But to actually back engineer a site, you can actually look for a long time for the call that is actually the one that holds the data. Do you remember when we did that for LinkedIn the first time? How many of the server calls we actually had to look through?
Oh, yeah.
To find the one that actually had what we were looking for.
Yes. However, yeah. which you're spot on, but there are tools you can search and go across. So it's not hopeless in that you got to click, because LinkedIn now, they dialed up their game in the last year, where
yeah, sure,
they have like an amazing amount, but a year ago it was much more manageable. But you can come in and I think maybe just hit Control F here and say if you know what you're looking for, and you can search for it, and then at least now you're only looking through 15 calls instead of 100.
Yeah.
But you're right, it can be a tedious process. It isn't always, but when you're working with, to Jackie's point, I think is where you're going with that, is it's a website and not an actual API developer network that you're using. It can be painful to figure it out. However, it can be very rewarding.
It can be very rewarding. I've found a few of these hidden APIs where, yeah, the website is displaying a lot of data, and they're hiding it behind whatever hover over buttons and stuff that actually triggers JavaScript and all of that. And when you then look at the actual HTTP calls that are going on behind the scenes, they're doing a very simple API call to their own servers. So you only need to be authenticated using the cookie as an example, so they know that you have an active session, and then doing these calls to their, you could call it hidden API, where you can get all of the data in almost no time, and there's no fiddling around with mouse events and stuff like that.
Yeah. Which is another great point of web scraping. Some of the newer stuff where you got to trigger events and do things that make it can, even when you know what you're doing, you're like, oh, it's tricky, and not nearly as reliable and consistent. And man, if there's an API, and it's super easy. So one example, I had a vendor the other day that they wanted to do some web scraping, and then they wanted to web scrape a vendor because they didn't have an API and get data out of it, and then they wanted to connect to their own data in Smartsheets. And for that, they're like, oh, we have an ODBC database connection that can pull data, and I'm like, in something like Smartsheets, I'm thinking they have an API I can use. And they're like, oh, well, they do, but they were going to charge us, a fair amount of money to build something, to interact with it, and blah, blah, blah. I said, you know what? Let me spend 5 minutes and take a look at it. And so I came home and I literally I'd say it was like 10 minutes. I created my own account. I uploaded some data, and in 10 minutes total, I was accessing and pulling my own data out from an API call, right, regularly. And I'm like, this is awesome, right? Once I, because I've been doing more and more API calls, I'm familiar with and theirs was straightforward, right? A lot of them are. Google is awesome. I'd say like out of those 100 APIs, 95 of them at least like use the same token and the same structure, and so it's really easy to switch between them and just making tweaks. And of course your endpoint changes and the parameters change, but you don't have to worry about all that different authentication and things that can be time consuming.
And I would say that if like LinkedIn, which is of course free to enter, but you can pay for quite a lot of the service for whatever you want to do. And of course, they're making their data less accessible. And that's one of the reasons that they can be hard to actually figure out. And that's also because, yeah, you might need to pay to actually access the API. So they don't want their free the free web page to actually give you all of this by just phrasing it. So again, Google, which often offers you whatever information or whatever service for free, might only limit you on how many calls you can do within a time frame. And I know that Google does that with a lot of their APIs.
Yeah. In particular, the translate
200 calls. Yeah, exactly.
Right. This translate here. By the way, I had looked at this one earlier. I've adapted this one to be much easier to look at and be consistent. Here's the endpoint, right? I'm going to. I read in my API key into this variable, and this is why I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about sharing it. And here are the parameters. I'm saying source is going to be in English. The target language is DA for Danish, right, Jackie? Yeah. And then here's basically the text. Hi, Jackie. I just used the Google API to translate this. How did it go? And then I pass it I tell it here's the parameter name is key, and I pass it that secret key value token I have, right? I build the API query string, and then I run it. And I actually did this a while ago. Let me run it here. And here this is it returned back, and I'm going to guess Jackie can actually read this.
Hej Jackie, jeg brugte bare Google API til at oversætte dette. Hvordan gjorde det? That's in Danish, and it's almost perfect. Let's put it like that. It's not perfect, but it's okay. It's only the last part. How did it do that it actually missed grammar?
I'm going to do it again in Spanish, where I might at least have a chance at it.
Oh.
Hola, Jackie. Hey. So anyway, it's a great example of just how easy it can be, right? And just imagine you could easily use the vast majority of this where you're going to pick the source language and your target language, but the text you're passing to it, right, is going to change each time. And then you're just going to get this stuff back, right? But to Jackie's point is when we think about it, they give you, I don't know what it is. Let's say it's 10 or maybe it's 100. I don't know. Calls per day free, and then after that you start paying for it. Which I say is a typical model in a lot of sources. They will give developers a low threshold of a free account to do stuff, and you can play with it. But if you start doing bulk, that's where they want to make their money, right?
Yeah, and I'd say that it's good if, let's say, I had a small app or program or something where it would make sense for someone to ask for the translation of something. It's not something that would be widely used, and it would maybe happen once or tens of times in a day. And then I could still use it for free. But if I had something big, something commercial, something like that, or I wanted to do it on a large amount of documents or something like that, then I'd have to pay. And I feel that's fair enough, as long as there's just a little room for actually doing smaller stuff for free.
Here is another example of using a Google API where I'm geocoding. I think this is actually the Google headquarters, and so that returned the Latin launch, right, for that address. It went and looked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can run it again, and this is my address. And now I just reran it, right, with my address. And here inside the data has a lot of other stuff, right? But you can see here is the address that it ran on. And this is where I would, and actually, like, I could easily look up my county I'm in too, right, or whatever, if you're doing this in bulk.
Yeah. And you're political.
Where did you see that?
It was on your county. There was something with the type of it being political.
Political. Huh.
Address component Texas, short name TX, type administrative area level 1, type political.
Yeah, interesting.
It's just funny that it's a type that is there a couple of times, and I can't see it actually having a reference for anything of any sort.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did anybody else have any good Spanish? Thank you, Jesus. Is there any specific questions you want? So here are the Google APIs I've played with and worked with, right? That are you can pass it a URL to automatically return the shortened API. You can look at your benchmarks of your websites, right, and speed. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the page speed. Analytics is something different where it's returning actual metrics on stuff. You can return your sitemap, all the stuff in the YouTube, and if you have YouTube videos, or you can update your tags and do whatever you want.
One thing to also note on all of these APIs, if it is a true RESTful API, then one of the built-in methods of AutoHotkey, the download URL file, will actually also work. So you don't need to know a lot of COM and stuff like that. If you just have the right query string built into your URL, then you can actually get it to download the same HTML format or JSON or whatever it is to a file, and then phrase that. Whichever method you like to use that.
So this is the functionality Jackie's referring to, which he's absolutely right. You can have it return that. What I found was interesting under the URL download to file, when you scroll down, they first show you that, but then they actually show you the WinHTTPRequest stuff that we're discussing, right? And then they give you the second one. This is that other one that tracks your cookies for you, or leverages your cookies, I should say.
Yeah, it manages them. I think it was said at one point. It actually has cookie management, so it will also update cookies and stuff like that.
The other thing I should mention, what was nice about this one in particular, actually they can both do it, but you can do binary file downloads too, right? And just it's a little more tweaking to understand what's going on, but you can literally point to files wherever and download them, which is very convenient. There was one more thing that this one it's this one that could be asynchronous, right, Jackie?
Yeah, it is.
So meaning you can do, they don't have to wait in a set process for one, and then the next thing you can do, a ton of them at a time.
Yeah, you could start one and then you could continue on with whatever you needed to do, continuing down to the script, and then just have a function actually tell you or set a value when the data is ready. So you could just simply start a download of a file or a web page or some other resource, but still continue on letting the user use whatever interface there's available or whatever it might be. So yeah, it can be a good thing to have.
Let me close some of this.
Yeah, we always seem to get a lot of different windows up. But
incidentally, this Mailgun API, so that I think the vast majority of you guys are on our email distribution list, right? I have Mailgun is an API service where you can send up to 10,000 emails a month, right, for free, and you use their API, and you can either programmatically send the stuff out, which is what I sort of do, or you can use Outlook, and actually it will do all the tracking and opens and sends and unsubscribes and everything for you. But it's a really cool API that, like, for most people, right, the cost is, I mean, it's awesome because there's no cost for what I'm,
Yeah, you just need to build something to actually use it, but other than that, it's free. Your Zoom thing is blinking. Has someone raised their hand or something?
I think it's going to blow up. No, I don't know. I don't.
Perhaps. It's just interesting that it was blinking.
Yeah, maybe something changed somewhere. I'm not seeing anything though.
Me neither. It's just, yeah, maybe it was something, but can't see anything.
Yeah, and this Clearbit is actually, let me even this where is it? Dun and Bradstreet one. I have a I think I adapted it. It's pretty complicated, but it pulls back. I can search on people, right, and see. They have a demo version that you can play with, and it doesn't return all the data, but it will return some of it, and it will show you. You know, it truncates the data values, but you can do queries and find people and where they work and where company sites are. I mean, the amount of data they have in there, if you ever know what Dun & Bradstreet is, I mean, they are the golden source of, like, data out there. And you can customize your queries to say, I'm looking for this type of the name, you know, at this size of a company or in this city or in location or whatever. And it was amazing. The same thing with the Clearbit one, similar thing overall, but they do a lot of the same stuff, and you can return back, search for people. They have a lot of free stuff of searching for people and businesses, but if you want to return a person, you can return their name and job role and title and the name of the company and a couple of things. But if you want their email address, that's where they start charging you for that.
Yeah, because that's one of the the sales points. Yeah.
Yeah, the Google Places API, I think I discussed that some earlier. It can search for, you know, businesses. Oh, and actually, Jackie and I were talking earlier about the starts with the Y, Yelp. Oh, that's why.
Yeah, the
Yelp.
Yeah.
That one you can query it and find, you know, both information about businesses in there, or look at ratings and things and just extract a ton of data from it. Again, I'll pop this open, and you can still see I'm passing key value pairs basically. And this one I'm saying look for a restaurant. The term is restaurants. The location is Capel, Texas. The category is chicken wings. And here I made a list. I think this is the link where I somewhere I saved the list of what the categories were, because you need to know that if you were to specify it. And then it would, let me exit out of these. And so that just did the query for, here are, apparently, I've never heard of this place, Hurricane Grill and Wings.
But you had a big radius on there. So.
Good point. Yeah. But the fact that, like this is free, right? And you can, again, it's, you could probably get all the same information. Oh, I don't know, I mentioned it earlier. Generally speaking, websites, APIs will have all the functionality of a website and possibly even more, right? Things that you can't do on the website, you can actually do with the API call, right? Often that's the case. Every once in a while, I ran into the other day where I could do something in the website GUI interface that I couldn't do with the API call. But that is, I think, the exception, you know, rather than the norm.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say that might be the case, and I can't put any kind of percentages on that, but yeah, sometimes you will have the web page actually accessing some different stuff for you, so you actually need to figure out how they're doing that, and that could be because they're using a different API to do that specific function. What is that? Zillow?
Zillow is a real estate one, and so here I have an API call where again I'm passing it my address, and let me do the call, and this one it returns information about the house, right? Oh, the other thing. So in it, here again, here's the top, right, in the request. But you know what I should have. Let's do this just to be a little more specific here in the API. What am I doing here? The location lookup. So actually, they're all on here. Where's my? So here this is where I do my API call, right? And all of them go to the same function where I'm passing it the endpoint and the query string. And so I'm trying to find my function. Here's my function, right? Here's where I keep it, and I should have adapted this to the HTTP stuff just to keep it consistent and less confusing. But we do the get, here's the endpoint, then whatever, we turn it. What I wanted to do was to demonstrate inside the function here, is it status text, Jackie? Do you remember?
No, I don't. Yeah, it was if you want them both. But yeah, status is the number and status text is text.
So I'm going to rerun this, and we're going to see a message box. So here's the 200. That's the status, right? That's returned, and I'm just showing it here in a message box. And then we're going to hit this, and it should say OK, right? And that's where you might build in logic to say, look, if you do your API call and it comes back and the status is like a 400 something, hey, something went wrong, right? I don't want to go look at the XML or whatever the return value is because the API call itself, something was wrong, right? And so that's where you start building in your error checking, right? And you can either put in look for the number, which obviously on average is probably more consistent, right? That's a number value there versus looking for text, which who knows if they might change the words actually come back.
Yeah, or I'm thinking that maybe it's translated.
Good point.
Which the number
being an American Centro, not thinking about that. That is a very valid point. That, yeah, it's saying incorrect in Japanese, and yeah, or it's saying no. It returns no in Spanish. I'm kidding.
Yeah. It could easily be something like that. I know that one of the ones that I've been hit by a lot, and that's not really translation, but it's the part where a lot of programs like Excel, as an example, is using other symbols, like the values ain't actually comma separated, they're semicolons instead.
Yeah, or a period. I remember we've talked about that before, some of the differences and the problems that come from it. But
so if you can use the status number, that's probably the safest bet.
Right.
And again, you have the list of actually what all those numbers mean. So you just have to put that into your program anyway.
I see a question here from Mason about how can you decompress with gzip from buffer? The function I found, the forum scan, so it doesn't seem to work. A little off topic. No, that's to me isn't. I don't think that's off topic.
No, but I probably couldn't answer it, and for some reason, if scans and lexicoses doesn't work, couldn't that be because it's old? And I don't know, I'm just guessing, but one of the things that I often see with older functions is that they don't really have this dynamic way of handling pointers and sizes. Whereas that's at least one of the issues I've often seen with the older functions there. Because if it's made from before Lectico's actually made AutoHotkey 1.1, then he might not have taken that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not what I want.
a couple things which I didn't bring them up, but just since you guys are here, obviously you're interested. There's and for the life of me I can't remember what HMAC stands for. Do you have any idea, Jackie, of the
HMAC? Where at?
It's well, I'm just displaying it. I wrote notes to myself to go back, and I want to include references to these things. But the 64 base, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jackie, my understanding of that is some things on the web are, they need to be, in order to go through the servers, they need to be encrypted into a format that basically won't break them, the string structure. Yeah. And so if you see something that says 64 base, there's a function on the forum, which I'll reference in here, but that just means you basically take your data, pass it through that 64 base function, and then that is what you send or to the thing or get back, right? It's what it's doing is it's making sure it's safe to pass through HTTP protocol.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the HMAC stuff, I wanted as a demonstration to show using the Amazon product API, which they don't give you a secret key and a token value. They have you jump through these other hoops to say, you know what, maybe I'm even lying on that. Maybe you do get a secret key and a token value, but they don't do the OAuth 2 thing. You then take you create this really long, and I mean really long string of different keys and parameters you're passing, and then I forget what HMAC is the abbreviation for, but it's basically like another encoding thing. And that's right, you give it a secret and this, and it encrypts it again, and that is what Amazon uses to make sure that you are you. And I haven't because I don't actually want to use it, I didn't keep going into it, but it was one I thought it'd be neat, but it was like, oh God, I just got tired of like trying to figure out. It was pretty complicated.
Yeah, I was kind of reading into what was asked by Mason and seeing what it was, and I can see that there's some discussion going on, and Lecticos has posted an example, but he's still talking about stuff being unreliable and you can count on this or that. So he's probably trying to get around actually not being able to make one that is consistent.
Well, I see that the hash, that was what the HMAC, the hash message authentication code. And that was, I had Googled it before I looked over, but anyway, yeah, that is what it was. And then there was this SHA 256. I remember that was for the Amazon thing. It was another level of like the encryption you're using within that. But yeah, it's one of those things like the more you play with them, the more variety of different things you'll see and how people do stuff, right? But it is amazing. To me, I tell people, I'm like, the only thing I get that gets me even more excited than doing the web scraping stuff is looking at the stuff that the web API stuff data is available, right? In the day we live in, like so many services open up and you can query their data how you want and extract what you want and do things. It's insane. It's so easy.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of times I don't really need a lot of APIs, but then all of a sudden I, for some reason, need to, my script or my program or whatever I'm doing actually needs to keep track of what the time is in EST at some specific moment. And instead of kind of trying to handle summertime and all of this different stuff and taking my own time zone into account, I can simply do a free online API call to a service that will tell me the exact time in the format that I ask for. So you can easily enough find reasons to use APIs because there are simply so many. So most of the time you don't need to build all kinds of stuff because someone else will probably have built something that you can leverage, and why not do it when they are so easily accessible? And for the most part, at least for me, most of what I do is allowed to actually access the internet. So
Yeah.
that's of course worth taking into account, because not all things that you do will have access or have unlimited access for that matter. So sometimes if it's for yourself, you will probably
It was totally off topic, but Jonathan, someone walked by behind you, and it looked like my wife, and so I literally like turned around because I thought my wife was home, and I'm like, oh, that's not even me. Yeah, freaked me out.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So yeah, is there anyone else got any questions? Any APIs that you love that we don't have on the list that you've played with?
Yeah, people are chatting about something different right now.
Yeah. I think it was Cat Mode said he did an app.
Yeah, he even did a serious Android app.
Yeah, I like the comedic side, but I guess you can do a serious one.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but and again, it's still the same overall concept, right? You have your device in some way is connecting to something. It has to send a request, whether it's a browser or doing whatever, right? An app sends a request, data's coming back, and you can customize. Of course, there's the authentication angle, but you can customize what goes there, and then when the data comes back, decide what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, sure. It is a lot of different stuff that you can actually do and access, and I felt that it is really but again, as it is with most things, you will probably have to come back to this when you have the need for the data, and at some point you will probably have that need. But to me, most of these APIs, I love the resource that you pointed to, Joe, with all of the listings of, what was it, 17,000 different APIs.
Yeah.
So if you are actually building something for yourself or someone else at one point, that's probably a good place to look.
And then just a reminder, if you work in the IT field and you're just, which I'm sure a lot of guys, if you're doing this, you are playing with APIs, but so many vendors now allow you to have API connections in doing stuff, and it's just a great, efficient way to deal with data. I see, was it Jonathan had said he uses a script that monitors the peak meter of mic, and then takes a recording and sends it towards it's a nuance, receives text, and then launches a hotkey for your command or dictates or translates. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. So it's kind of a speech recognition thing, it seems like, right? Just like the built-in one, probably.
Yeah, I actually, if I recall correctly, there was one for the Google text to speech, and I played with it, but that was one they started charging, if you're using it, which is weird because then you can just use your phone and do the same damn thing for free, right? So I'm like, that's weird to me, but yeah, it's one of those things. It's just endless as far as the uses.
Yeah, sure. But there is the one built into Windows as well. Do you remember we accessed that with a COM object at one point that also had speech recognition?
Sure.
But the thing here is that he's actually monitoring his mic's volume to actually do some of the stuff, it seems. Whereas, it could probably be done in a lot of ways, but it's interesting.
The other thing that's what it took me a while because when I first started it was very sparse that I would use APIs, and every time I would start a new one, it was like, oh God, do I really want to go down this path? But the more I use them, the easier it is for me to see similarities across them. And literally now, like often in minutes, like that Yelp one, I literally in like 20 minutes had connected to it, was sending stuff, getting data back, pulling out what I wanted and exactly what I wanted. And it was just like, wow, this is awesome. But it had much more to do with that now I have a clue what I'm doing, right? There was no explanation like this that would walk you through. Here's the different parts, right? Here are the things to look out for, which is why this was a great thing for a webinar.
Mm-hmm. It sure was. Absolutely. Are we about to wrap it up? It's late here.
Yeah, unless anyone has anything, anything else, I think we're good.
It seems like we got around it and we actually hit a lot of different parts of it.
So let me just lastly, oops, that's the wrong one. So this is the API syntax writer I said I'm working on, right? And here again, like here I have an example where this will dump in an example API call, this and that. My plan at some point is to go through and basically in a lot of my different API calls, I will go recreate, this part of it. And then you'll have to go create your own token and authentication, stuff. But then you can just leverage the whole code, right? Once you have your own token key combination. And then, of course, you're free to, you want to parse out different information. By the way, here's one other. There's sometimes when you connect to them, you'll see something that says it requires a bearer token. And this, I finally found it, but it's not documented really anywhere. But you pass it through as a header, often as a header under authorization. And this one you'll look at the documentation because you don't always put the word bearer here. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But it's come through as a header is what I've noticed, and it's not part of the URL, and it's not part of. We didn't mention earlier, but when you're doing a post request, this is where you put the payload. So your payload would be in here, and it gets as the data, right? It passed through. So when you're doing, if this is a post, oops. Then I think you have to. Am I incorrect in that, Jackie? But nearly always, right? There'll be a payload. That's what they call it. They call it something else too. Envelope. Is that what they say? I've heard it referenced to something else.
Envelope? No.
No. Okay. I know I've heard another term for it, but it's that you send the payload, and that again, that is much harder for other servers and everything to scrape and to intercept. And that's why it's a security.
I always just call it the body or something like that.
Maybe it is body. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. But again, payload is just, it brings the meaning across anyway. So, yeah.
Agreed. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to, I'll try to get the references and stuff because there's a lot of good stuff in the deck. Of different links you can go back and study and look at and stuff on AutoHotkey Forum besides elsewhere. And we'll try and get that hopefully later today because tomorrow I'll be back out with my son in the camp doing day camp stuff and I'll be melted 8 hours of walking around in 95-degree weather. So I'll try to get that done tonight.
Yeah, 95-degree weather. Yeah, that sounds hot. Almost boiling here. Yeah, that's always fun.
All right, guys. Have a great evening or day or whatever it is, wherever you are. Awesome.
Absolutely. Sure.
All right. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.